Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Show to Be with Mike G, the show of life, the show of Islay, the show of Ardbeg, lyrics, boxing, and so much more. I've been wanting to interview Cameron George, the national brand ambassador for Ardbeg, for years now. I think we first met right before pandemic, and he and Dan Kroll from Glenmorangie, they started a podcast. So, you know, it's nice to interview a fellow podcaster, a fellow interviewer. They conduct conversations quite brilliantly, and I learned a lot about Cameron. This is one of my favorite interviews I've done. It worked so well. You know, I often talk about these interviews as being this jazz duo. I'm not being cheeky, I really do mean it. The ebbs and the flows, those differences in rhythms. It was really brilliant to talk to you, Cameron. So without further ado, I hope you all enjoyed this great chat with Cameron George.
Yeah.
He's new to it.
Blue hair. Yep,
that's right.
Exactly. And, you know, I've been in 7 Grand here in Austin a bunch of times.
I think that's where we met, actually.
Yep.
I can't remember what for, but
it was after Whiskey X.
Oh, Whiskey X. That's right.
What, 2019?
Yeah, some time ago.
Yep.
It was a while. I like the culture of whiskey mostly.
Yeah. Mostly. Yeah.
Well, so here's something that I noticed about you, because, you know, we're talking your Southern Grand piano in my living room, whatever, and your grandma was an opera singer.
Was, yep.
Okay. And you mentioned in an interview some time ago that didn't pass along to you, that musical proclivity.
No.
However, I'm gonna guess something. I don't know if I'm right, but I've noticed the distinct improvement in your vocabulary and distinct improvement in how you express yourself verbally in the interviews over the years.
Yeah.
Were you ever a lyricist or a rapper?
Nope.
Nothing, really?
All right, that's a lie.
Okay.
I can't believe you asked this question. At one point in time, I did make one song.
That counts then.
One of my good friends, Keegan, from a long time ago, had a recording studio in like the shed out back of his parents' house. Right. So I used to go hang out over there, and we would write occasionally. And I did jump on the mic once and record it. It was very short lived. That track will never see the light of day.
But how did you feel about it after, though?
I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I guess vocabulary has always been something that's an ability to communicate oneself has always been very important to me. Because of my family as well.
What's that tie in there?
Yeah, so my mother's an attorney, my aunts are attorneys, my grandmother was, an opera singer, and then when I was a kid, my dad would make me write at least one story a week. And so
fiction, nonfiction?
Just about whatever I wanted to write about.
No kidding.
Yeah, exactly. So I grew up writing and utilizing a swath of vocabulary and words from all around the world in different diasporas. I would also say my mom got just an incredibly generous and very kind heart.
Yeah.
She can be very pointed when she needs to be. She's very powerful and very, very strong.
Yeah.
Kind of this personality when she walks into a room, like you feel her presence before you even see her. Yeah, definitely. And it was another very fun thing that we used to do when I was a kid is I would use a word and she'd say, spell it. And then if you couldn't spell it correctly, she would make you use a different word.
Okay, if we have this next thing in common, I'm going to take a shot at this Ardbeg. Same here. Mm-hmm. I just was creatively driven to write as a kid. I don't know why, and then it's kind of resurfaced later. But did you ever win a spelling bee?
I never won a spelling bee. I never won a spelling bee. I should have. I probably should have. But then again, I had stage fright.
Did you really?
I grew up having pretty immense stage fright if it wasn't an athletic endeavor.
Oh.
Like to this day. if you ask me to karaoke, I'll knock over everything in this room attempting to leave and flee as quickly as possible.
Which sport then was your? I can't tell, but looking at you.
Everything except for football. Interesting. I never played football, but basketball, baseball. My mom played tennis in college, so I grew up playing tennis. Actually played a couple of weeks ago as well. Good. Still got it. Yeah. Still was able to serve. Yeah.
So it's very rich kind of tapestry of background for you.
Yeah, very
which
rich.
I love that it's this blend, at least so far, of physicality, but then also intellectually, right? Were you relatively well traveled as a kid?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why there's a proclivity for Scotch whiskey, actually, is because the Shetland Isles were the first place I visited outside of the U.S.
Really?
Obviously, you have to stop in London to get there.
Yeah.
But that trip was the first international trip that we ever took as a family. I think I was 8, actually, because my sister would have been about 4. And I have this just very profound memory of us playing around outside of London Heathrow, my dad tickling my sister, and then she falls and busts her chin open, and we had to start the vacation by taking her to the hospital so she could get some stitches in London.
Man, it's interesting that we all come from this place. I think something that drives me, not only when I'm asking questions of people, because I really love people, and I think you love people too, hence why you've been in hospitality so long, but I have this just undying, insatiable curiosity for things.
Yeah.
Do you find that you're the same way?
Yeah, very, very much so. And actually, it was Dan and I were just talking about Dave Broom's new book, Sense of Place. And in that book, he acknowledges that whiskey enthusiasts oftentimes ask how, but I feel like people like us take another step forward and ask why.
Yes.
And that inquisitive nature is something that has been insatiable for me since I was a kid as well.
Have you, and I know this is maybe a strange question, but have you ever considered having a podcast?
Dan and I actually did run a podcast for a little bit during the pandemic.
This. Yeah.
It's something that I would love to get back to because, first off, I'm a massive podcast enthusiast. But then also in terms of bringing other people's stories to the world and to light, there's something powerful about being the vehicle for people to learn about situations, about circumstances, and about people from different walks of life as well.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. This is not going to be a political conversation, but people love Joe Rogan for some reason, right? I don't. I don't give a shit. I really don't. You know why I don't like him? He's a shitty interviewer.
Yeah,
it's always about him.
Yes,
and so I look at it, interviewing as an art, and I think you do too, because you just revealed what I think is at the crux of it, and that is, we're merely here to be a vehicle for the guests to share their life, and I always set out to make sure whoever listens to this fucking thing, that they fall in love with you.
Yeah.
And there's only one way to fall in love with somebody, and that's to know them.
Exactly.
But besides the verbal part of it, which is the podcasting element, do you still write as exercise? Do you write creatively, maybe a memoir of some sort?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that in my day-to-day life and operation as national ambassador for Ardbeg, oftentimes I'm writing, whether it be tasting notes, stories of the place as well. But then in my own kind of sheltered palace of solitude that I exist in, yes, I do still write memoir. I also journal a lot as well.
Very good.
One of the things I love about the career path that I've been able to voyage down is that it takes me to a lot of really interesting places, and I get to meet a lot of incredible people, but I don't have the best memory. So I have to write things down.
Interesting.
Or else they were here today and gone 3 days from now.
It is a weird thing sometimes that there are these moments, and I get why people might take pictures of cocktails. I mean, I do it not ad nauseum. I get why people might take pictures of dishes they've eaten and things. There's people that do it so that that they're eating, and then there's people that do it for memory. But how often? So we know that also something that smudges the lens a bit is if you drink a bit of Scotch whiskey, right? Do you have a practice to commemorate these things like on a nightly basis? This journaling, is it when you first wake up? How does it really register for you?
Yeah, so I try to journal at least twice a week. Okay. Usually my journaling day is first off on Monday, and then when I have time on Saturdays as well.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Again, the Monday-Saturday split actually came from when I was behind the bar. I used to not work on Mondays, and so it would give me time to sit with my own thoughts. And I actually used to do it after therapy. I would go into my therapy session and then journal immediately afterwards. And then on Saturdays, I would wake up in the morning and journal before going into what was inevitably a very, very, very busy day.
Interesting. So kind of creating some inner peace a little bit.
Exactly.
To get mise en place of one's thoughts.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Through this mechanism of journaling, which I've been writing articles, I'd say it's kind of journaling, but I do write it in a way that I want people to be able to understand there's a larger point, there's plot devices and stuff like that. But I've really quickly learned a lot about myself through the writing. And journaling is probably something even more introspective. So let's say lately, as you continue to maybe pursue therapy, you continue to unwind the things that are in your mind. Have you learned anything about yourself that's more clear now than it ever has been?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially this year, one of the themes of my journaling has been that I have a shorter fuse and shorter temper than I thought I did. I've always run a little hot, very much so. When you look up what a Leo is supposed to be, there might as well be a photo of me.
My two ex-wives, man, I'm telling you.
Right? Yeah, I'm the atypical Leo male. But this year I've realized that my journalings there's been an element and a through line of like frustration, which seems a little bit more out of place because the world usually knows me as this smiley, very, very friendly individual. And I think, human beings exist in multitudes and we're supposed to be multidimensional and have many different complexities, right? And one of the ones that again has come out to me through just reading back about my journaling this year has been this just a frustration, and it's not at anybody in particular. I think it's at a lot of the state of the world, because again, Leos take on a lot of stress from other people as well, right? Like we when we're up, and when we're down, we're down. And so because of the state of the world, I feel like I've been more frustrated in 2023 than I ever have been before.
I mean, that's incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
But then I guess it begs the question, knowing that this is in clear plain sight, what do you do to mitigate that?
Yeah. Find joy whenever possible. Again, it's very difficult, especially with the lifestyle that ambassadors lead, where we're traveling constantly. It is very difficult to take moments of solitude and moments for yourself and to be in the place that you want to be with the people that you want to be around. So trying to find ways to integrate that into my work life has become very, very, very prominent in 2023 as well.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I have a little bit of experience with Leos blowing up on me. I don't think we're going to go there here this afternoon, which is good. But I know they like the attention.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I like some attention. I'd rather the attention be on other people, to be honest. When you do these tastings like you did last night at 7 Grand, where you really have, for lack of a better term, a captive audience, is that something that keeps you in the game, that keeps you engaged, knowing that, in a way, everyone's hinging on your next word?
Yeah. This is a really interesting question because I can tackle it from two different directions. I think direction A is that, yes, being a Leo and being somebody who is an extrovert by nature, of course, I do love a little bit of that limelight. Yes. That leading a whiskey tasting brings you. But very similarly to like conducting a podcast, the same way that we speak about, using Joe Rogan as an example, having a figure that is so large and looming oftentimes casts a shadow on the subject that is supposed to be the focal point.
Yeah.
And so the second part of my answer would be that when I am leading a tasting, of course, I want to do it with my own personality, but I'm not the focus. To be honest, the whiskey isn't even the focus. The focus is on the person or the people that are sitting across from me or sitting, directly, at the table with the tasting mat and their glasses of whiskey. Because to fall in love with whiskey is to rediscover elements of yourself. We're an amalgamation of our own lived experiences. The most beautiful representation of our own lived experiences. And to nose, to taste, to delve all of your senses into what's happening in a glass, you have to call on those lived experiences. So it means that you basically need to reevaluate your life, understanding of the culture, the circumstances that you come from, and then find things reflected in that glass of whiskey.
I had a moment when this is all tied together. I was at the Museum of Modern Art in Edinburgh. One. I got two. So it's part one, right? And the entrance to that thing is fucking spectacular. Yeah. As you walk up this cobblestone through the woods, basically. But I saw a piece, and I can't recall who the piece was from, but it was someone I had heard. I don't think it's Jasper Johns, but there's some Jasper Johns work there. And just like that glass of whiskey, when you are faced with a piece of surrealist art or impressionism, the only way you can interpret that art is through the lens, which is, you said, an amalgamation of those experiences. And so that's maybe the beauty of whiskey too.
Yeah.
Do you think people look at it that way though? Some people, I think they think it's a means to an end. It's a way to get high, all these kinds of things. But do you find more and more that people do want to experience it, not just taste it?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, in 2023 now, we have distilleries who have quadrupled their distillery output, have massively grown in terms of size, and then now you have consumers that want to visit not only to taste the whiskeys but also to experience
feel it,
right? Like whiskey tourism is alive and well.
Yeah.
And whiskey tourism wouldn't exist if it wasn't for people asking the question, well, why does this taste this way?
Yes.
And trying with everything that they have to understand what the people are trying to tell you in the form that is liquid. I mean, whiskey is a solution, like chemically.
And pragmatically.
And pragmatically, right, as well, right? It's maybe not a solution to all of our problems.
A good few, at least.
Exactly, but a good few of them, for sure. So I definitely think that in 2023 now, more so than in the 90s or in the early 2000s, I definitely think that people are looking at whiskey with this doe-eyed kind of affinity for it, not only because it's delicious and we should drink more of it, but then also because we do see ourselves represented in it.
I love that, because then it makes it more art than it ever was.
Exactly.
Because you can't experience a piece of art or a good glass of any spirit unless you allow yourself to feel something about it.
Yeah.
And you feel about things because you've been there.
Exactly.
Which, there's a question I certainly want to get to, but I just got back from Islay like a week and a half ago. And it changed my life.
Yeah.
I've been all around the world. So if
I'm not jealous or anything like that. No trips to Islay for me this year.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, no trips to Scotland for me this year.
Oh, what a bummer.
I know.
Well, we'll just have to do some kind of side fundraising, get your ass out there.
I hope my bosses hear this.
They're going to hear it. I will make sure they hear it. I love it. But what does Islay feel like to you?
Yeah. Man. That's such a difficult one and such an easy one at the exact same time. When I was first hired about 5 years ago, I went and I stayed at Ardbeg for about a month.
Oh, wow.
And so Islay now feels like a like a place that I don't want to say home, but a place that my soul resonates with, that feels familiar, right? And it felt that way the second that I stepped foot onto the island.
Exactly.
I mean, I went to Islay for the first time well before I worked for Ardbeg.
Yeah.
And, you know, to me, the overcast, rainy days felt like growing up in Seattle,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
That smell, somebody used it yesterday, that chemical compound of petrichor during our tasting. They were like, it smells like petrichor. And I was like, you've been doing your reading.
Yeah.
You're a nerd, and I love it.
Yeah.
And to me, I was like, that's something that's resonant with the circumstances that I grew up in, right? And the smell of rain in July in Seattle, and then the asphalt immediately heating up because the sun has started to come out and the mist has started to clear. Islay feels the exact same way oftentimes to me. Now, on top of that, you know, I've never been somebody who's inclined to go out on long sea vessels and voyages. But taking the ferry over to Islay again reminded me of taking the ferries back and forth between Seattle and Vashon up in the Pacific Northwest. So again, another element of the sense of place that seems to communicate right down to every fiber of my being. You know, and then, you know, of course, one of the most beautiful aspects of Islay is like actually walking around the island itself.
Yes.
I grew up in Seattle, obviously, which is a very walking friendly environment and very walking friendly city. So I oftentimes could be, as a kid, had to walk from, you know, the central district all the way over to the community center up these long hills.
Right.
So taking these jaunts up to Loch Ugadal, again, it's very familiar to me.
It's that parallel I didn't draw, but it makes a lot of sense. For whatever reason, and I wrote about this, I put out a piece last night because it's so resonant. And there is a distinct possibility, given much of my lineage is from Scotland, that this is the first time I'm there. And I felt connected just from the moment I got into Edinburgh, you know? But there was something about, I was at the Port Charlotte Hotel.
Yep.
Popped the window open. Real difficult window to get open. I mean, I work out and shit. It's hard to get it. But once I saw everything that was out in front of me, that coastline, the birds, and felt that always brisk air against my face, I started crying.
Yeah.
And I still go think back, and it's like really moving. And I don't know why, and I don't think I need to know why. But to echo one of your points, there's something that connects with your soul there.
Yeah.
And you have any idea what that could be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interestingly, Islay is a very complex, like, geographical landscape.
Yeah.
It's actually two different islands that have kind of force welded themselves together over millennia. The northern side of the island is actually significantly older than the southern side. The northern side actually shares a like geographic like thumbprint, like geological thumbprint would probably be the better word there. That is actually similar and kind of akin to a lot of the igneous rock that you'd find in South America. So there's this really interesting conversation that can be had about connection between human beings and then the ground that is underneath our feet. Right? So the northern side of the island actually would have been some of the very first rock and geological formations that would have formed on the planet.
Oh my God.
So there is this immense connectivity between humanity and the sense of place that is Islay itself. You know, it's difficult to articulate until you go there and you feel it. It's one of these instances where if you ever like listened to a song that made all of the hairs on your arms stand up, it's a very, very similar resonant like frequency that kind of runs through Islay. As soon as I step foot onto that island, every hair on my body stands up. I'm alert. I'm aware of my circumstances and the situation and how important it is not only from for the people that live there, but the hundreds of thousands and millions of people that can trace their ancestry back there as well, of which I can too.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Like I think it's just as few as my great grandfather, like or as most recent or as recent as that. Yeah, there's something about that. And you've been to Oaxaca, I've been to Oaxaca. There's a similar tone in the Sierra Norte, like when you're up around the clouds and stuff, but still not as resonant.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very strange, but lovely and beautiful, and it's addictive because I can't think, I've over the years, rather as a younger man, there'd be women I was kind of seeing, and I was just like totally obsessed with them, But I'm obsessed with Ireland. But I think it's because something is exuding from the land itself.
Exactly.
I can't describe it.
Yeah.
And
you look at even the way that people have heated their homes and cooked their food and made their whiskey was wholly dependent on the land beneath their feet. Like there are, again, Broom speaks about it at length in his newest book as well. But there are heritage barley strains that have grown and could only thrive on the islands of the Hebridean Islands and then up on like Orkney and near Skye as well, because of the very unique thumbprint of the acidic soil there. So you have this communication between like nature and mankind, that those two things are run in parallel path and benefit from each other oftentimes.
Oh, it's so symbiotic.
Yeah.
And being in a city, because you're still located in Seattle. Yeah?
Yep.
Even Austin, Austin's a city. I mean, you can get out of the city and stuff, but like you hear the other noises, but you don't hear nature. Yeah. And in Islay, you hear it.
Yeah. You hear it all.
Yeah. It's really quite incredible. So yeah, I'm gonna take that moment here, just like, God damn.
Yeah.
It was such a beautiful experience. I gotta go back, and I got go visit y'all too.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite memories on Islay actually is, I love the place, but I have just a supreme affinity for the people, because they understand what it means, what the essence of the word community means.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Right, and like that fabric is almost impossible to dilute or to tear apart. And honestly, I see a lot of it resonated in like my upbringing as a black man here in the U.S. Right, there's this acknowledging of one another and an ability to make each other feel seen, and take care of each other as well. That when I first got to experience what it means to be community on Islay, there was another immediate parallel, because there's this protective nature. There's this will do anything to sacrifice to make sure that my neighbors to my left and to my right are able to thrive.
Yes.
There's this, it's just beautiful, right? And so one of my favorite memories was actually hanging out in the inn in Port Charlotte.
Oh, no.
Right? And we're hanging out late night, and there may have been a beautiful young lass that I immediately made eye contact with across the bar, and had a couple of whiskeys, whiskey 1, and I was like, all right, whiskey 2, whiskey 3, and I was like, I'm gonna go talk to her. I'll do it, right? So I go over and I start talking to her, and she's there with a group of her friends, and actually co-workers, and they actually worked over at Bamor.
Oh, dope.
And so we're hanging out, and it's a bunch of my co-workers, and then our groups kind of just melded and merged together, and just this really interesting tapestry of people hanging out in the bar. And then it gets to be the end of the evening, and they're like, hey, you want to come over to like our house? And so we all go back over. There's this one woman who was maybe 65, 70, who worked at Bamor, and she had been at Bamor for about 30 years or so. And we go back to her house, and we're hanging out, drinking more whiskey. All of a sudden, she goes to the kitchen, and we're in her kitchen, and she opens up this cupboard above her stove, and pulls out this plastic jug with almost this like maple syrup, dark, deep brown liquid. And immediately we're like, this is obviously whiskey we're about to drink.
Yep.
It's some 45-year-old Bamor that she just had hanging out in a plastic bottle. And then she ended up breaking out the bagpipes and at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I think that was one of the most Elic experiences that I could have ever asked for. And it stemmed from me just going over and talking to a girl at the bar. And I got something that was in many, many different ways, something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
No, those kinds of moments, we have to be open to them. That's actually what it is. Your point of going and talking to the lass across the bar. There always has to be a little bit of an ignition.
Yeah.
You meet amazing people randomly, but you sometimes just have to say hi.
Yeah. Just have to say hi.
And you never know what's in store. And I think in the States, outside of the hospitality industry, which you always know someone who knows someone who was in Seattle, and it's like, oh, But outside of that, in the States, I don't feel it runs as deeply here.
Yeah.
That hospitality.
Yeah. Subcultures, though. In subcultures, there is this connective fabric and tissue.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? But as a whole, if you look at a wide swath of people, we don't have this meniscus or this connective tissue that and ties that bind us in the same ways that Islay does and that Elix do.
I agree.
Yeah.
Something I was thinking, because when kind of listen back on some interviews with you and such, and some of my assumptions, I'm gonna pat myself on the back, which I seldom do. I was right, because I could tell you really focused on elocution, the words you use, and that's something I find we have much in common, especially if you're on a microphone and it's come in here, the volume of the voice, the words you use, all this stuff. And if I had often at meetings at work, I'll take tallies of all the ums I hear.
Yeah.
And if it became a drinking game, I would have died
years ago. You would have died years ago. Yeah.
But this is the thing, is that you're obviously insightful. You're passionate. Likable. All these things, right? And this is not to give you compliments. That's not the point. But it sets a stage for something you said some years ago that I don't understand why this would happen. And apparently you were asked to leave college. With whatever detail you can share, what are kind of some of the circumstances surrounding that?
Absolutely. When I see, we would have had to drink right there because I let one go. When I was entering college, I had two things on the mind. Hanging out and partying and playing basketball. I went to college on a basketball scholarship. I absolutely love the things in the life lessons and the mental fortitude that playing sports lent me.
Yeah.
But I didn't follow through with the fidelity that I should have in I guess focusing all areas of my life with the same level of execution that I did on the basketball court. So I didn't study the way that I should have. I didn't attend class the way that I should have. And I didn't pass all of the required testing, drug testing.
Which now in hindsight, who gives a shit, right?
Yeah. Now in hindsight, but everything is more valuable in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
But during those early years in college, I was a little wayward, and I lost my path for sure. And so the college that I was attending, we had a difference of opinions.
Yeah.
And so they said, "Hey, maybe don't come back here next year." And it was something that was hugely divisive for my family as well, because I'm the only one in my family without a college degree. My sister is incredibly, she takes after my mom. My mom and my aunts, obviously being attorneys, are incredibly learned and very, very active in their communities, and speak and preach highly about the merits of higher education, which I do believe in. But it just wasn't the pathway for me at the time. There's something to be said about reinvestigating that. I do a lot of continued learning courses now. Just applied for a Harvard Business School course as well.
Great.
But at the time, it wasn't I didn't have the maturity, the level of maturity to dedicate my life to the thing that I was passionate about.
Right.
And that was something that, now in 2023, in hindsight, I'm able to call my younger self out for that. I do believe that like lessons don't mean jack if you don't learn from them.
Oh, totally.
And then implement in real world practice what you've learned. And so now that level of attention to detail, that level of passion and investment and over investing in not only the thing that sits directly in front of you, but like the things that may be on its peripheries that do matter and do mean something to it. So like in the case of whiskey, not only just learning about Ardbeg, but learning about organic chemistry, learning a bit more about the history of the Highland clearances, what it means for Scottish culture. All of those things, while they may sit at the periphery of the whiskey world, they all matter, right?
Yeah.
They all add up to what sits in your glass.
They converge there.
Right? They converge. So that's a lesson that I took from my past failure as a student, and have reacclimated and kind of repurposed into my profession. But I also believe that we're always students at the same time.
If you allow yourself to be.
Yeah.
If you're not learning, you're dying.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Yep.
Or to quote In the Voice again, because I want to do this. I said this yesterday. If you get busy living or get busy dying. Right? Which is a Shawshank thing. But that's what it is. And for me, living's learning.
Yeah.
You have to.
Exactly.
They're inextricably linked.
Yeah, true.
So I got a couple questions left for you. This is the thing, is it with someone with such a rich palette of experiences. We could have done this in any number of ways. We could have talked about The Sound of Music, which it's fine. I like Julie Andrews. I don't really want to talk about it. We could talk about Rush Hour, which I love films. I don't really want to talk about. Great film. Leave it at that. I love Chris Tucker.
Great film.
I somehow like how Samuel L. Jackson killed him in Jackie Brown.
Yep.
I thought that was real tragic. That was really good. Tarantino nailed it. The only stuff he never wrote. But kind of in this moment now, kind of learning a little bit more about you, you must love a lot romantically.
Yeah.
And I won't make any assumptions about having a partner or not. But when it comes to getting married or these things you can hang your hat on or starting a family, do these things matter to you? Is this part of the plan for you as well? Because sometimes the endless curiosity about the world can say, well, I don't necessarily want to be tied down. Not that those two things are mutually exclusive, right? But for you, what does that mean? What does family mean, starting a family, these kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from a fragmented family, one that, I have family all over the world, here in the States, from Alabama to actually over in Houston as well. A lot of family down in Houston. Used to spend my summers down there. Lots of family in the Bay Area. And then obviously my mother is up in Seattle. Right. So starting a family of my own is definitely something that I have wanted. But this inquisitive kind of traveler's heart at the same time. And the more that you get to see of the world,
the more you want.
The more of it that you want.
Yeah.
And so starting a family has fallen onto the back burners for sure. And it's also, I think an element of, if I can open up on the microphone here as well, fear, right? There's a level of fear for me, specifically, I think, because, I've great examples of marriage and long-term fidelity, again, to use that term, are short and are in short supply.
Yeah, right.
I look at one of my best friends, Dan and Becky.
Oh, they've been together forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the truest, iterations of a healthy, loving marriage and relationship.
I admire it.
Right. I admire the absolute hell out of it. I actually just asked our bosses. I was like, hey, are +1s allowed at our company Christmas party? Yeah. Because I love Dan, but I love Becky. Right? I was like, I want to make sure that Dan's bringing Becky because, whenever we all hang out.
Well, no one really loves a drummer, let's be honest.
Yeah. Love you, Dan. But we have the best time, right? And so if it's not that, then I don't want it.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't grow up in a family that, you know, my both of my parents are still alive, thankfully. But they're not together, right? And they haven't been together since I was 11, you know? So, you know, that from the jump, I had an example of like a parenting and family dynamic that was slightly warped, and I don't want to say broken, but wasn't the cookie cutter and wasn't atypical. So for me, you know, if it is not healthy and flexible and able to change and evolve as we evolve, then I don't want it. And finding a partner that is okay with, you know, the changes that you may go through as an individual, and then also the iterations that relationship is going to go through. Through my 20s was very, very difficult to find. And in my early 30s now, it's still proving to be elusive.
Yeah. I understand. It could be a whole other podcast that we start about love.
Yeah.
And then the good and stupid things we do for
absolutely
the same.
A lot of stupid things on my side here.
Yeah, same.
A lot of them.
Same. But, you know, we'll get it out into the ether via our writing.
Exactly.
And someone can peer in if they want to, take the time to actually read it on the page.
Yep.
All right. So I got one question left for you. Here's the thing, you know, to preface all of this is like, we talk about Dan Kroll from Glenmorangie, we talk about David Blackmore from Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, and didn't talk about Dr. Bill, but it's just great players involved, great brands, and I love this stuff, and Ardbeg is really close to my heart because of the team. So that being said, my last question for you, and I ask everybody, is let's say you're sipping any Ardbeg, it doesn't matter which one, anywhere in the world, also doesn't matter, but you can have a conversation with any musician, kind of catering into you specifically, any musician living or deceased, who might you like to have a dram and a conversation with?
Ooh, yeah. Honestly, this is a great question. It's not that hard of one. I already have it preloaded here.
Is it because you knew I was going to ask you?
No.
Okay.
No. You know, I definitely, I had an inkling that we would broach it, but I didn't, you know, put this one in the back pocket. I actually just had a really interesting experience with this musician.
What?
And it didn't go the way that I thought or hoped that it would.
Oh, I love this.
So I would absolutely love and relish the opportunity to share one of my absolute favorite whiskeys, which is Ardbeg's Arnhem Bashed, with the one and only Jay-Z.
Oh, shit.
I would love that opportunity and kind of a mulligan again, if I could. We didn't get to, you know, be properly introduced or anything like that. You know, it was a very brief exchange that just left me feeling like, oh man, I want that back. I want to do that again.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
But Jay-Z's insights into art, individual expression, family as well, generational wealth, building generational wealth, what it means to truly look back at yourself and at your family and how to do better than the people that came before you.
Right.
All of those things very much so resonate with me. And, you know, I will fist fight anybody who tells me that the Black Album is not one of the most beautiful works of, at least in the hip hop and rap genre, artistic expressions.
And you both have an affinity and a passion for words.
Absolutely. Very much so.
And how you put them on the page, how you articulate them into the air. Amazing answer. I love it. Man, I've been fascinated in this quick, even though we've been chatting 40 minutes, surprisingly, right? But like, I'm just fascinated to learn more about you. Yeah. And again, not to flatter it, because Leo's, they get off on that shit.
Oh, right? I'm going to push people out of the way in the airport now because of all of these compliments.
Did you hear what he said about me?
Did you hear what he said about me? Yeah.
This fucking guy from Austin, Texas.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm glad we finally did it. It's taken a couple years, but the timing finally worked out, Cameron, and just really a pleasure to get to chat with you, mate.
Of course.
Hopefully we'll do it soon.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much for not only this, but then all of the incredible conversations and the light that you shed, not only on the spirits from around the world, but then also the individuals who create these things as well. That's almost even more powerful than imbibing on the liquid is getting drunk on the persona and the personalities.
See, now I'm turning into a Leo.
Yeah.
Thanks, dude. We'll talk soon.
Love it.
Cheers. Oh, well, there we have it. Cameron, George, a Leo. I don't care. You all can squint and shake your head. I use these things very loosely. Aquarius things, Leo things. But the vibrance of Cameron's personality, that fire, you can tell. There's fire there. There's passion there. And it was really a great conversation. And I feel like it was incredibly transparent. Sometimes guests don't reveal things. They don't want to. And I appreciate that element. I don't find myself to be that way. And I don't think Cameron is that way either. And I can't wait to try the new Heavy Vapors release from Ardbeg. I've got so many Ardbegs. I keep wanting more Ardbegs. So thanks so much, Cameron, for sitting down and chatting with me. We'll have to do it again over some drinks. And thanks everybody for listening to Show to V with Mike G. No matter how you're really enjoying this cooler weather in Austin because it gives you time to take morning walks comfortably, or if you're thinking, I got a lot of meetings for a Thursday, please keep dancing.